Hello, everyone. My name is Natalie Robinson. I am a senior on the women's beach volleyball team here at UW, and I was formerly on the indoor team as well. And I'm here today with Lisa BaughnSmith. And Lisa, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lisa BaughnSmith, and I'm here representing Women of History at the UW. And I teach eighth grade science in Kirkland at Kirkland Middle School. I've been a teacher for 30 years at different schools, but that's where I currently reside.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm really excited to get to know your story from UW Athletics. So I'm going to jump right into it. I'm going to give a little bit of background, so feel free to jump in wherever you want. But you played on the UW women's volleyball team before women's sports were sponsored by the NCAA. So that made it the Association for Intercollegiate Athletics for Women, which was pre-NCAA. And I have here that you played in the early 80s, which would be right after the passage of Title IX. So I was hoping just first you could talk to us about what it was like playing back when it wasn't the NCAA and your experience at UW.
Well, I don't have a whole lot to compare it to, but Title IX was passed when I was in high school. And I do think I was a really, really lucky female athlete because the high school that I went to, my coach for basketball, volleyball, the track coach, she did it all there. She was so progressive. She was so ahead of her time. And even when prior to Title IX, when things weren't as equitable as they are now, she was always fighting for the women's teams, for the women's programs. And so I was really fortunate in high school to be part of a program where women's sports were valued and our community valued our teams as well. So I guess I was lucky in that sense, but in hindsight, I would say that, going into college and playing a competitive sports to me was just a given. I think that the few of the women that were a few years behind me wouldn't have been able to say that. So I was right on the cusp of that. And I benefited by just being at the right place at the right time, I guess, born in the right time. But certainly playing prior to NCAA didn't change the competitive nature for me. It didn't change the purpose and the value and the great camaraderie and everything I got from being an athlete at the UW at that time. I'm sure it would be different now if I went back and played. But little things like I think back and go, well, certainly like my coach's mother sewed our uniforms. So there's a perfect example of how different things are. She was a fantastic seamstress, but she made our uniforms because we didn't have that kind of money or status at that time. I remember it was a really big deal right when I got to the end of my career when the annex was built. And we finally had a facility to practice in and call our own. And we had a locker room to call our own. And we had some of the advantages that we saw that the men's teams had. And towards the end of my career, when we were having two-a-days, we would actually get to be fed in between our two-a-days down in the crew house, along with the football players, which hadn't happened before. So some things were different, but I will say I didn't have any other expectation. So those all felt like real big wins to me. But I'm glad in hindsight that they were just the beginning of the change, right?
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible. I can't imagine not having three different jerseys, washed for me in between the games.
Yeah.
It makes me think about how lucky we are now. But that's interesting that you didn't feel that it was anything special because there was nothing to compare to.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so you said that you were in the right place at the right time. So Title IX passing, did that, did that mean a lot to you in the moment, or is it just a thing that you recognize in hindsight as being really important for women?
I think it meant something to me in the moment, but not as much as it does now in hindsight. I grew up in a very athletic, competitive family, so I was always playing sports. I went to schools that had people that promoted that. I will say my middle school, or at that time it was junior high experience, was definitely not, that was pre-Title IX. And we did not have access to the things the boys did. We only had, we didn't even have mixed PE groups. We had boys PE and girls PE. Heaven forbid we put them in the same PE class, right? And we had, I don't even know what they call it now, but it would be more like an intramural type sports. I didn't play volleyball in middle school. I didn't start until high school because I didn't have it. So that I really appreciated when I went into high school, that I got to actually compete at a real level, like with other schools and with real coaching in a real game. I didn't really fully appreciate everything my coach there did and everything Title IX did until I was able to reflect back on my life. And I thought, you know, I can honestly say that it changed the trajectory of my life completely. I don't know that I would be the person that I am today. Literally, not just my career, but just my personality, the direction I went in my life, the things that matter to me, if it wasn't for the opportunities that Title IX provided me.
Yeah.
Because just being able to compete and be an athlete at that level is a life-changing experience in and of itself. And had Title IX not passed, I probably wouldn't have had that opportunity.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, we talk a lot about how our identities are being athletes, and being a female athlete is secondary to that. I think we just consider ourselves athletes. So
Right.
I feel fortunate to look back and know that a lot of women never could have called themselves athletes
Yeah.
until Title
Yeah.
IX and the NCAA was
Yeah.
passed. So just continuing to reflect, what are you most proud of seeing how women's sports have developed to today?
I'm proud of how I believe that male athletes in general, and I know I'm generalizing here, and that's not true for every single one, but I would say that male athletes get it. I think by and large, male athletes really appreciate female athletes. I don't think they separate that really as much either. I think that I'm proud of the fact that we have moved in a direction where we can separate out. We have to identify a gender when we talk about an athlete, and I'm really pleased that people that get what it takes to be a college athlete, they appreciate it regardless. Um, I still think that we have a long way to go, certainly. I mean, nobody would argue with me on that. You know, from from a high school to a college level to a professional level, there's certainly huge gaps in equity at the level beyond college. And I know that some people don't completely understand really what equity means. And so I know that it impacts them, and they feel that somehow or another something's taken away. But I don't view it like that. I view it as, this is always an addition problem. This is never a subtraction problem. And I think women have a lot of power that is that's untapped, I guess. This untapped power that's not just the physical power side of things, but that emotional power, and that just that innate sense of what it takes to be a female, and not always have historically been taken as seriously, and having to have fought for many, many things that we currently have. So I'm really proud that women athletes have come to this stage of the game and are getting, by and large, what they deserve to get. The honor, the respect, the rights, everything that they deserve. They work hard. They work just as hard, if not harder, than the men. And I don't feel like it should be a competition, us and them. I think it should be, we all work hard. We all get.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like thinking about it as an addition problem. That's a really
Mhm.
interesting insight that I want to I might borrow later.
Feel free. I'm not sure where I got it, so you can have it.
Yeah, spoken like a true teacher.
Yeah.
Um, well, this is all amazing to hear. I guess something else that I would ask you is just if you could tell a little girl starting her sports career right now, say a 5-year-old girl, and she's going to grow up and be, a women athlete in college and maybe even beyond, what would you tell her?
Let's see. Well, the obvious, never quit. Never quit. You will get knocked down. You got to get back up. You are not going to be the best at everything always. And when you think you are the best, you're still not the best. So you need to get better. There are always things to improve. There are always ways to be more humble, to listen to people who might know things differently than you or more than you. And you just stick to it. You have to give it everything you've got if you want to meet a goal. And that's not just athletics, that's everything. But certainly when you're looking at doing something that only a very small percentage of the population gets that opportunity to do, becoming a college athlete at the level, at any level, but particularly at the level of like the UW, the percentage of people that become college athletes and get to really play on a college team and experience that 1 to 4 years of amazing, it's just, I don't know how to even put words to it. It was just an amazing experience. It made me a lot of who I am today. There's just not that many people that get to do that. So if that is your goal, then you need to make yourself stand out. And sometimes that's through talent, but a lot of times that's also through just pure grit, pure determination, coachability, humility. A lot more goes into being an athlete than just having physical talent. A lot more. So work on yourself, be the best person you can be, and always, always, always improve.
Absolutely. That's awesome.
Mhm.
You were the first All-American in Husky volleyball history. Um, how do you feel about that? Every single woman that has come after you that has been an All-American, and we've had quite a few, is standing on your shoulders.
It's a strange feeling because I'll tell you a funny story about that, and then I'll finish that statement. So when I was playing, never did that enter my mind. Never did anybody mention anything about it. Never did we as a team ever talk about anything about that for any of us. It just didn't enter my mind. And I think part of it's because it's a team sport. So we really have to acknowledge that regardless of what I may have achieved, I achieved that also on the shoulders of my teammates. And so it just didn't ever enter my mind when I was playing, honestly. I just was really competitive and I just wanted to be the best player I could be. And the funny story about that is I had no idea that I was even nominated, that I was even being considered. It wasn't anywhere in my radar screen. And I remember sitting down one day and I just vaguely recall like a journalist of some sort from a local newspaper or something. And it was during a practice and they pulled me off to the side and they asked me, what do you think about that you've been, and I can't remember if it was just nominated or if you've gotten this award or whatever. And it was the first I heard of it. I didn't know. I had no idea. They completely took me by surprise. And I remember, I can picture exactly where I was sitting right there in the annex. I can picture every minute of it because I just had no idea. And it took a few days for that to sink in at that time. And I wasn't really sure what to do with it because I was certainly very proud of myself because I worked really hard. So I won't discount it. I don't want to minimize the value of that achievement because I know what it took for me to do that. But I also it felt a little awkward because I knew how many amazing players I was playing with. And so it was like, well, why me? Why I was just doing what I love doing and I was able to achieve this. So that was kind of the weird, two sides to the feelings that went with that. But certainly a great deal of pride. And now in hindsight, a great deal of pride just knowing that there have been so many others that have followed in that it didn't just stop in the first two or first three or first one, that there are amazing athletes that are still achieving that level. And to be honest with you, I believe this wholeheartedly. I earned that at that time, but the players now, the level of play and their skill and their talent so far exceeds what I did. It just so far exceeds it. The training is more precise. The injuries are probably less because of that. The regimen around their days is better now than it was for us, and it was just because of the time. So, I joke and laugh sometimes when I'm watching some of the UW matches and go, oh, thank goodness I'm not playing now, because I wouldn't have even made the team. So yes, I'm proud, but I'm really, really think it's great that hasn't stopped, that level of play and that achievement of that level of honor has continued to go on. And it's kind of a fun fact now that I'm significantly older, to throw out every now and then, particularly with my students or people that didn't know me before my hair was silvery color. They knew me when I was a redhead, and they're like, "You did what? You played what? And you were that good? Really? You were?" And so that's kind of a fun little, two truths and a lie moment in a lot of staff meetings and things.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. And yeah, UW volleyball history is certainly something to be proud of. We have some amazing women have come through our program, but it's really, really incredible that you're the first and that you're here talking to us right now.
Yeah, and it becomes even more incredible in my mind the older I get, because it's so long ago now. So much time has passed since then that so much of the rest of my life has taken over priority in the front of my mind. I'm more occupied with my current life than my past life. And so every now and then when I do stop and I look back, or, when we've been at games and my daughter or friends or something want to go into the Hall of Fame and look in there and see all that stuff. And they're like, wow, that was you. And I go, yeah, that was me way long time ago. So it's kind of fun.
That has to be the greatest fun fact of all time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, just to wrap up, I'm hoping that you could share with everyone kind of just what a day in your life as a female athlete was when you went to UW.
Well, it's certainly, I would imagine, very different than it is now. There's no doubt that going to school and playing, practicing and having matches and, the travel and everything is pretty much the same. Certainly we didn't fly places as much. It was very rare that we got to get on an airplane. It was usually in vans or things, but we did actually fly to places. However, our day-to-day, everyday routine was probably a little bit different because we just didn't have the resources that are given to women's sports now. And, Title IX passed, but that didn't mean that it changed overnight. And that didn't mean that sports that were not big revenue producing sports were still, whether that they were male or female, were still going to get the same resources as the others. And so being a volleyball player in that time, many of my teammates had part-time jobs. Even some of the women that had scholarships couldn't afford they barely made it on their scholarships. So, they would spread the scholarships out amongst several people as much as possible. And that it helped more people. But those that had scholarships, even myself, I lived at home. Fortunately, my family was close enough that I could drive back and forth, but I couldn't afford the extra cost it would have been for me to live on campus or to live off campus. Even I had to be at home. We had to wash all of our own uniforms. We had to, I don't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure we even bought our own shoes. We may have at one time in the course of my career, I vaguely recall some big deal of getting shoes. Like, whoa, we got shoes. Some had, like I said, some had part-time jobs because they just had to get enough food. So there were a lot of other stressors, and I didn't have as many of them as a lot of my friends that played on the team that came from out of state and didn't have the choice of whether or not they were having to pay rent or pay for their dorm expenses or for gas for their car or all the other things, their books or whatever. It just depended on what slice of the scholarship pie you got. But nobody at that time, regardless, full scholarship or not, got everything paid for that I'm pretty sure they do now. So it was harder because it distracted you from the purpose. It distracted you from your goal. If you're worried about paying your bills or you're worried about eating enough because you just, finished a 3-hour, practice and you're famished, but you only have mac and cheese at home or something. I'm just making this up. But if you're thinking of those types of things, those all distract you from your goal of being the best athlete that you can be. So I think that's probably what it was, a really different way of living for an athlete at that time. And I say athlete, not just women athlete, because I don't really know what it was like for some of the male athletes. I'm sure that there was some differences for them too. I think it's improved over the years. But certainly from our perspective, I think of traveling, it was such a big deal when we were staying in a, semi-okay hotel because we had the budget for that. And we were good. We were a good team. All the years I played there, we were good. And it wasn't like we weren't bringing in the crowds that you could bring in at that time, which was nothing like what they are now. But we brought international teams over a couple of years to play, and we were always contenders within the conference. But it was still like that. That's just what it was like. You had to work really hard outside to keep your life going, and then work really hard on the court to keep your sport going.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting to hear. Makes me really recognize how lucky we are now, and not to minimize all the work that goes into it today, but
right,
have it a lot easier in a lot of aspects, and we're really fortunate for that.
Right. I think, even off season is probably a little different because there's probably not as long of an off season now as there was then. However, like I recall during off season that, we would work camps or we would work whatever jobs we could work just to get enough money so that we could return to school the next year, that we could make it work. And that's not to say that our scholarship money didn't make a huge difference. I don't want to downplay that because the cost of tuition and the cost of room and board and everything was significantly different as far as just inflation purposes. It would be much more difficult now to make ends meet as an athlete if it was the same scenario. But we worked in the off season as much as we could to be able to offset the coming year. And yet there wasn't enough time because then we were going back in the summer and starting training again. So we only had a short period of time where we could actually earn some money. And yet we were also still going to school oftentimes. So, it's just one of those things that you just choose to do because that's what you want to do. So you just do it, right? It's amazing what you can accomplish when you just set your mind to it and do it.
Yeah, that is amazing. And, you've really paved the way for some really incredible things to happen here at the UW for all sports, but especially within the volleyball program. It's a special program, and it's a special athletic department. So
and it holds a special place in my heart, certainly. Once a dog, always a dog. And, I cherish those years that I played volleyball there. I cherish the friendships that I made. I occasionally have contact with a few of them, largely through social media, but they're out there still, and I know that. And that was so fun. Are you kidding me? It was such hard work, but it was so fun. I mean, I lived, ate, slept volleyball, and I just couldn't get enough of it. And it was amazing. It was just such an amazing experience. And I did certainly have a different college experience because I was a college athlete than when I compare it to some of my friends that weren't college athletes. But I still think I got the better deal than they did, to be honest with you. I had time after I was finished with my volleyball eligibility. I still had 2 more terms of college credits to get. So I got to have a little bit of college life without being the athlete part. And I remember thinking, I don't know who to be or what to do. My identity's gone. I'm so accustomed to being this student athlete on campus, and now I'm just another student on campus. And it's not like anybody recognized me or anything. Nobody knew any of who we were, but it was a different experience to be able to participate in this, just the student part without the athlete part. I way preferred the athlete part.
Yeah, I do
Way
too.
preferred it.
Me too.
It was great.